All right, guys, welcome to the Tampa Powerhouse. We're out back with John Hansen. How you doing, John?
Good, Paul. How you doing?
We're going to talk today about peaking a physique for stage. So a couple weeks ago, I think I inadvertently convinced John to do a show.
Yes, you did. It wasn't on my radar at all, but you put the thought in my head.
So he signed up for the show, the holiday classic that we're about to do. And I brought up the idea about a peaking protocol that I've been using for years on my athletes with really great success. Kind of not a typical peaking approach, I think, in the bodybuilding world.
Right.
It's more typical for me now. I call it linear loading. Dr. Joe Klemczewski introduced me to it years ago. And last year, my competitor, Brian DaCosta, actually won WNBF World Overall title. So I know a lot of people associate me with, female competitors, which I've had, last year I had 2 at the top 10 at the Olympia, using this peaking protocol as well. There's a little bit of a difference between men and women, but it's mostly about the amounts.
Yeah.
The philosophy doesn't change. So last week we did a mock peak week where we basically kind of manipulated carbohydrates each day, and it went pretty well. You liked that, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So talk to me about what you noticed last week with the changing in the carbohydrates.
Well, last week what you had me do was we went really low the weekend before, Saturday, Sunday. So you brought my carbs all the way down to 120, which was extremely low for me, and cardio twice a day.
Yep.
So really deplete the body of glycogen. And then on Monday, we just started going up.
Yep.
And I think we started at 200, 225, went in increments all the way up till Friday. And then this week, you kind of modified it a little bit. So we hit it harder on the weekend.
Yep.
Went to 90 minutes of cardio, which I've never done before in my life. And then 120 carbs again, 40 fat. So energy was super low, got really flat. And now we are on the final week going up, and you're slowly having me go up, but a little bit more conservative than last week.
Yeah, and so the reason I'm being a little more conservative this week is because last week what I noticed was the scale kind of popped up, and I thought we were getting a little bit softer towards the end of the week.
Yeah.
So the reason, the weekend before what I do the load is deplete. I also find that like the double cardio kind of ramps up the metabolism. So then when you start introducing food back in, you start burning through it a little bit more consistently.
Yeah.
And most competitors are a little crazy. So it's kind of exciting when you see the scale dropping. And it's even more exciting when the scale drops and you're eating more and doing less cardio.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mind fuck.
Yeah.
You're like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Why didn't I do this all prep?
Right.
But it really only works on extremely lean physiques. And if you guys will see, we'll do some posing and some training with John. He's extremely lean. He's actually leaner than he was last week. I saw it when I walked in. I could see the separation is deeper this week.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm being more conservative is because I'm probably going to be more aggressive on Friday.
Okay.
Because what I find is that when you're filling out a muscle, now the idea, the philosophy behind linear loading is if you think of each muscle fiber as a balloon that you're inflating, if you deplete that balloon all the way flat, that would be a terrible look on stage. The muscles aren't pushing out against the skin. If you fill that muscle completely and it spills over, that's also a terrible look. That's where water gets in the interstitial layer between the skin and the muscle. So the perfect place to be is where the muscles are filling out, but they haven't spilled over.
Yeah.
And that's why the linear load is nice because it's predictable. Each day now it does require a little bit more diligence as a coach because you got to check in each day. You got to know your body pretty well, but you're just predictably filling out the muscle fibers each day a little bit more. And then you can get pretty aggressive on Friday, especially if we're still seeing the drops.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen when you back off the training intensity on Thursday and Friday, inflammation comes down. And I find that the body just responds really well. You'll actually probably, let's say we do 400 to 500 carbs on Friday, you'll actually wake up on Saturday a little bit flat.
Wow.
But it's not because of the carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are in the muscle, but it's just because you're going to need more water and sodium. So what I typically find is a lot of competitors on show day are cutting out water and sodium, or at least near the show. And then they realize the vascularity that you have, that's from blood volume. Your blood volume is bigger when it's, blood holds water in it. So what happens when you cut sodium and water near a show is you lose blood volume and you lose the ability to fill out those veins. Have you ever competed and just couldn't get a pump?
Oh yeah. I think we've all done that. Yeah.
So I was pretty lucky. My first coach was Lane Norton, and now this was 2007, and he gave me a plan that's not this plan, but it was. I did not restrict sodium and water, and I remember being backstage at my first NPC show. It was Deke Warner's Mid Florida. And I was in the athletes meeting, I was eating a sub, and I was drinking a gallon of water And people were like, what are you doing?
Right.
I was like, I don't know. My coach told me to do this.
Yeah.
And I would never forget. You go backstage and I start pumping up and everyone's like, how are you getting a pump? Like, I don't have no veins. And I'm like, I just followed my plan.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's when I started getting into the idea of like, okay, what's different about this approach? I think it's scary as a competitor to do the opposite of what everyone's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But with this approach, because we're going to see you each day, there's no guesswork. You know how you're going to look on show day because you're just going to look 5% better than on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We're not. How many shows have you done where you like, and that's happened to me, you wake up, you go in the bathroom, you turn the light on, and you're like, Jesus, let me look good,
Yeah, right.
So this is an approach that does not scare an athlete. Your psychology is going to be in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, you're going to be excited to wake up every day. I think you said today you woke up and the scale was even down a little bit.
Yeah, down a little bit from yesterday.
Yeah, so he's actually
depletion.
a couple pounds down from our first mock peak week.
Yeah.
And the other benefit of this approach is like, you're ramping up the metabolism so high. Let's say we had another show in 6 weeks. We would be eating a ton of food going into that next show.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that when I have competitors do multiple shows, which is usually the case, the body just gets easier and easier to manipulate the more food you have and the less fat. There used to be this thing about don't peak too early. You don't want to lose your muscle. You don't have to, it's not a problem now.
Yeah.
So the linear load, and I'll put on the screen here for you John's peak week plan so you can see his carbohydrates each day. There is a variable day on Friday, so based on how things are going.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say this, if you wake up tomorrow and you're down a pound or two, I might start adding more food tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's why we adjust each day. But the goal is just to take that predictable amount of food, fill you out. And so when you're backstage pumping up, you look the best you've looked all prep.
Yeah.
The judges, they don't ask you how much cardio you did. They don't ask you how many carbs you've eaten.
Mm-hmm.
They don't ask you how long you've been training. They are looking at a snapshot of your physique. How many times have you seen an athlete completely flat at pre-judging? They go out because they're pissed off they got second call-outs. They go eat some junk food and drink a bunch of water. They come back and they're like, oh.
Yeah.
And the judges are like, what? If you'd have had that.
Yeah.
I've often thought this about the Olympia bodybuilders.
Yeah.
How many of them look better the next day?
Oh yeah. All the
I think
time.
they go out and eat.
Right. Right.
So
I used to judge shows and I used to see that all the time. It was a dramatic difference from the morning to the night show.
yeah, because they went out at lunch and they stuffed their face.
Yeah, they
and
were
more
flat.
importantly than stuffing their face, because I hear a lot of people say, well, I had like 500 carbs the night before, and I'm like, but you had no water and no sodium.
Mm-hmm.
Water and sodium are what transports all that into your muscle fibers, and it's blood volume. So the volume of your blood is less. You're not getting the digestive system involved. You get that bloated belly.
Yeah.
See people that like, I ate pancakes and they're just sitting because you drink no water.
Right.
So, yes, I know, and I think some of it comes back to the feedback, because sometimes you'll hear a judge say, oh, you were a little watery. Drinking water does not make you look watery. Watery is too much body fat.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so when what I find is like when you're actually shredded, if you don't drink enough water throughout the day, you're going to look worse.
Yeah.
So bodybuilders that are shredded, they actually look better with each meal on show day.
Yeah.
And since this is our first show doing this approach, prejudging so early in the morning, we're probably going to be about 90 to 95% of where we want to be. I bet you by finals, you look even better than the morning.
Yeah.
Which is going to be fun because we're going to have the rest of the day to kind of keep filling out.
Yeah.
And most of us aren't super like awake at 9 in the morning when you're going to be getting on stage.
Right.
Whereas like now it's like 12:30 in the afternoon, you've had a couple meals, you're about to go train some legs. This is when the body starts to wake up.
Yeah.
So when we go back to finals at 5 o'clock, you're going to look just that much better.
Yeah.
But I will make sure you're ready, because that's something to take into consideration when you're peaking an athlete is like, what time are they getting on stage?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be more aggressive with an earlier competitor. If you weren't getting on stage till 3 p.m., I'd be pretty conservative and fill you out more on show day.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we've been following John. We've come here a couple times to see him. The reason we don't want to train legs too close to show, you don't want to be sore on show day. It does blur some of the separation.
Yeah.
Well, we will do a 1 day out. I think I'll probably come over here Friday and meet with you.
Okay.
Are you going to train here Friday?
Yeah. Yeah. Friday in the morning.
Yeah, so Friday morning what I'll do is I'll come over and I'll train with John, and we'll do like our little circuit and we'll do some posing. And the idea there is I can just get eyes on you and say, and you'll tell me, oh yeah, I'm better than I was yesterday, or I'm flatter. And then we can get a good idea where we're at. So yeah, this peaking method, I call it linear loading. It's just the idea of you're linearly increasing carbohydrates each day. That's really the only variable I play with.
Yeah.
You keep the fluids, you keep the sodium, you keep the foods the same.
Yeah.
Keep digestion predictable. You don't want to be adding carbohydrates and adding vegetables. You want to make things super easy to digest.
Right.
Any other thoughts that you've had? using this approach so far?
I think it's great. I mean, I'm glad we did that workout a few weeks ago and you suggested this, you know, doing the show, because I was kind of in shape a month ago and I was just kind of playing with it. Like I go up and down, you know, up one day and down a couple days, and this works out great. And I think the key, like you said, is getting super lean and kind of even depleted and then slowly going up, you know. Most people, I think, do the carb depletion, carb loading. I remember this was the old day, you know, they deplete for 3 days, go up for 2 days, and it just wasn't enough time. And there was a lot of variables in that, and a lot of people would miss their peak.
Yeah, and so the approach you talk about was one that I had used in the past with Lane. We would fill out on like Monday, Tuesday, and then taper the carbs down, and I would look great Wednesday, Thursday, and by Friday I would be getting a little smaller. Now I would still look better than some of the other athletes because I was still not cutting water. But I would always be like, God, I look great on Wednesday. So when I talked to Joe about this approach, the food's just always going up. The problem with I call that the rapid backload, where you deplete for 3 days and then you try to slam like 500 to 1,000 carbs a day before the show. The problem is there's a thing in between your mouth and your muscles called your digestive system. And when you completely deplete food for 3-4 days, and then you try to eat so much food in a 24-hour window, the digestive system just isn't used to that. Right? Your stomach is actually kind of more condensed. So I've had athletes, and believe me, I've tried all the approaches because I've been like, hey, I've seen this coach, he does it this way. What I consistently saw was they would look pretty good, but they would look great the next day. Because now your body had time to assimilate all that food. Whereas with this, on Friday, by the time I give you 500 carbs or 400 carbs or whatever it is, you had 300 the day before, 250 the day before. Your body is already humming. So it just makes things a bit more predictable.
Well, it's worked out great.
You know, this is how to peak for a bodybuilding stage. Don't make it complicated. Get shredded, load it up.